structure, but we're a program of the comptroller. And as you see, we're considered a tool that CPA can use to assist other agencies and other public entities. We work exclusively with state agencies. We work exclusively with public entities. If it's a taxpayer-supported entity, then they're eligible to receive some of our support, and they're eligible to participate in some of our funding opportunities that we announce regularly. And you can see our tool is we promote the efficient use of energy, and we want to reduce energy demand. So we do that through a variety of programs. I'm going to tell you about those coming up. But again, we use energy efficiency, demand reduction. Those are our primary tools of how we help public entities. And when you look at our audiences, you can see that our primary audience are K-12 schools, public higher education, and local and county governments. We have a variety of services that we provide to those entities, and they include energy education and training, technical assistance. We have an emerging clean energy technology program, and we have our, as an anchor, our Lone Star revolving loan program, which is a low interest rate loan program. Now, on our Watt Watchers program, this is an energy and literacy education and training program. It's for public K-12 schools. And what we're trying to do is help kids become more literate in terms of energy education, energy efficiency. Is through a STEM-based curriculum. And if you have school districts in your area that are not using Watt Watchers, this is a great way to get them involved so we can get the kids and the families and everybody else involved in energy literacy to help us promote that as a cause going forward. You see also that we have a City Efficiency Leadership Council program, and that is targeted small to medium-sized local governments, and it's to share institutional knowledge. It's to help each other benefit from the experience of others. And there's regional meetings that take place basically on a quarterly basis. So if you want to learn more information about that, let us know. We also work on the industrial energy efficiency, and that's through the refineries and oil and gas, and also through small manufacturing entities, helping them become more energy efficient. And again, that's an institutional knowledge and education and training awareness program. Again, if you want to become involved in that, let us know. And then we have our HVAC practitioner training. We have SPEAR goes around the state helping HVAC practitioners learn about the energy code, how to apply the energy code and what they do. And it's been a wonderful success on that program as well. And then finally, on energy code training, right now, we have a tour going on where we're doing 2021 IECC training throughout the state. And it's so that if you have a local government and you're interested in learning more about implementing a 2021 IECC, this would be a good energy education training program to attend. And if you haven't had one come by your area and you're interested in having our vendor come by and train people, let us know. We'll be happy to put you in touch with them and see how you can get on the schedule. We also have a technical assistance program where we provide preliminary energy assessments and technical assistance to schools and local governments. It's free of charge. The purpose of this is to help you identify savings and energy savings opportunities that can pay for themselves within the estimated useful life of those individual measures. It's a third-party opinion. Professional engineering service firms that come out and will do the assessment. And then what they will do after they complete the assessment is they'll sit down with you and your CFOs and other decision makers and help you identify where opportunities are for energy efficiency savings so that you can redirect some of those utility savings and spend them on capital improvements rather than paying the utility. On our technical assistance requests, we get a variety of requests for help. And you can see the list there. A lot of times we found that local governments and schools may not have the expertise in a particular category of information. And so what they do is they'll send a technical assistance request to us, and we'll send our engineers out there to help them with a specific need. Give you an example on this Energy Star certification. We have several school districts that have contacted us, and what they want to do is get a couple of their schools within their district certified as Energy Star compliant. And it's a great good news story. So if you're looking for good news and good free press on the good things that you're doing, you might want to consider Energy Star certification on some of your buildings as an option. If you have new companies that are growing and trying to get established in your area, but are looking for funding or looking for ways and training to get put in front of investors, and this is in the clean energy technology field, then we work with these two clean energy incubators, one at the University of Texas, the second one at Texas A&M University. And what they'll do is if you're accepted into their program, they'll help you prepare for investment. They'll help those companies make sure that their company structure is set up properly. And again, it's a great economic development opportunity to help companies in your area grow and to help them get investment and to help your area as a whole just become better known for creating new technologies and jobs in your area. So that's the purpose of this program. And then finally, we have our Lone Star Revolving Loan Program. This is a low interest rate program. And the purpose of this program is to make capital efficiency retrofits on your buildings. And you want to do this by redirecting your utility budgets you're now spending on utilities and redirect some of those dollars towards capital efficiency retrofits. We can help you and teach you how to do that. And you can see we have funding available. Our interest rates are well below market, and it's a first come, first serve opportunity. So the size of the loan request is not as important as your position in line. So if you want to learn more about our Lone Star review program, let me know, and I'll put you in touch with the folks and give you some information as to how it works, what the benefits are, and why you should consider it as well. We also have statutory activities. We're responsible for energy code adoption in the state of Texas, and we're also responsible for energy reporting for local governments and state agencies for the state of Texas. So along with our other duties through our funding from the Department of Energy, we also have statutory activities that we have to comply with as well. All of our funding that we receive and how we operate is from formula funding. What Crystal is going to talk about are competitive opportunities, and where we operate is we don't get involved in competitive opportunities as a lead agency. We get involved and we have our laser focus on formula funding. That's formula by formula, that's funding that the Department of Energy sends to states. And I'll tell you a little bit more about some of these opportunities next. You'll see that on the formula funding, there are opportunities through our state energy program, our Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act program, and our Inflation Reduction Act program. Now, in the state energy program, we apply for funds every year from the Department of Energy. And you can see how we use our money right there. We have all of our preliminary energy assessments, our technical assistance, the programs I've been talking about are funded through the state energy program. You're going to hear from the COGs after our presentations, and you can see we help fund the COGs as well to help them do what they do even better and to reach a wider audience. You'll see that some of the other programs that I had not focused on or mentioned is we have a program coming up for PACE financing, and that's for smaller projects. We found that there are opportunities for PACE districts, but lenders don't want to lend on projects under $250,000. So we're creating and helping set up guidelines to make it more palatable for lenders to lend for smaller projects on the commercial side. And then you'll see some of our other training programs that we have as well. If any of those programs are of interest to you and you want to learn more about them, let us know. We're happy to set up a meeting with you. Now, in addition to our annual funding, we applied for formula funding through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and that's also for the state energy program. And there you see how we're going to use our funds. For this particular allotment of money, this is a 5-year plan. You'll see that we're going to focus our efforts on county-owned LED lighting retrofits, public ISD lighting retrofits, public IC solar and battery retrofits, and then community college. That's energy sector training, where we'll furnish equipment to existing programs at community colleges so that they can help train the workforce and train them using the latest and greatest equipment as it relates to energy efficiency. And then finally, we have our, well, this not finally, sorry, our Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act. It's a revolving loan program. You can see how we plan to use the funds. This is a $20 million application. And this is currently under review at the Department of Energy. And as soon as we hear from them, then we'll take the next steps and issue in requests for applications. And we also have our Infrastructure and Investments Job Act, called our Energy Efficiency and Community Block Grant application. That's also formula funding. And Crystal will get into this. We are receiving funds that are not direct, that are not intended to be used as direct awards by cities. So if your city is receiving a direct award, you probably won't be participating as much in this program, because our focus is going to be on local governments that are not receiving direct awards. And you can see the types of activities that we proposed as part of this funding. This application is in review, and we're waiting to hear back from the Department of Energy on the status of that application. Now, when I mentioned the IIJA, and you hear that, the thing you have to remember is there are compliance requirements that often will throw off our small contractors and other local governments from participating. We will help the applicants prepare their applications. We'll help them get set up for some of these activities by letting them know what's expected up ahead. But you can see there's disadvantaged communities, there's Build America, Buy America. You see there's match there, but DOE said that there's no match requirement on some of these IIJA funds, which is good news for everybody. But there is Davis-Bacon, there's historic preservation, and there's NEPA. All of those are requirements of receiving these funds and implementing these funds. So you just need to be aware of that before you decide to apply for the funds when they become available. And you need to make sure that your contractors are aware of these requirements as well, because we don't want that to be a hang-up or to keep them from being successful in what they do. Now let's talk about the Inflation Reduction Act. The ALRD, which means Administrative and Legal Requirements Document, was issued a couple of weeks ago. that's what the Department of Energy issues for formula funding. And you'll see the three programs that they issued ALRDs on are the Home Efficiency Rebates Program, the Home Electrification and Appliance Rebates Program, and also on contractor training. Everybody wants to know, when are these rebate programs going to be implemented? What I would tell you, it's not going to be before the end of fiscal or the end of calendar year 2023. It'll be sometime in 2024 when these rebate programs will be launched. And so if you're expecting it now, unfortunately, I don't have good news. We're at the preliminary, very front end stages of setting up our programs. We're still asking a lot of questions to the Department of Energy as it relates to the programs. And then after that, then you have to go through an RFP process for administration selection. It all takes time. So again, it's not going to happen soon. It's going to happen sometime in 2024, and that date is to be determined. But what I'd like for you to do, if you want to make sure that you stay informed as the process develops, is we have a place on our homepage where you can sign up for notices so that whenever we have funding opportunities, whenever we move forward with in making decisions on this Inflation Reduction Act opportunity, that you'll receive an email. So make sure you sign up. And I put the webpage link where you can find us. Bottom right-hand corner of that webpage, you'll find us. If you have other questions and you want to learn more or want to set up a meeting on any of the other programs that were previously talked about, or want to learn more about what we do, you see my email. I'll be happy to put you in touch with the people that can directly help you within our office. And so I know we're going through a question and answer probably towards the back end of this discussion. So Lyle, that's the end of my presentation. If there's anything else you want to talk about specifically related to what we do, I'm ready.
Great. Thank you, Eddy, for that presentation. I'm really looking forward to the county hospital lighting retrofit program. I was just thinking about how, in our rural areas, hospitals are, struggling for money. I mean, who's not really, but especially hospitals. So I think this could be an opportunity for them to help with that a little bit. So it's excellent. Great idea.
Yeah, it's an underserved community of people, and it's people, as you well know, that hospitals are even having difficult times getting doctors going out there because of outdated lighting, outdated equipment. And
Okay.
so we're trying to help reverse that trend.
Fantastic. Thanks, Eddy. I'm going to turn it over to Crystal now. She's from the Department of Energy, and as Eddy alluded to, she'll be able to talk about some of the competitive funding opportunities that the DOE will be rolling out with, or has already rolled out. So, Crystal, share your screen and take it away.
I am attempting to share my screen. It looks like it's thinking. So, give me 1 second. Okay. Can y'all see it? Okay, perfect. Hi everyone. Let's get into this. So we're going to talk a little bit about IRA, and you really can't talk about IRA without talking about Bill IIJA. If you hear me say Bill or IIJA, the infrastructure bill, it's all the same thing. Branding within the department. In the department, we call it Bill, but if you hear me say that, it just means the infrastructure bill. So I always give that sort of PSA before I get started because I use those interchangeably. So we will go to the next slide. So we're going to do an overview. We're going to talk about IRA, how DOE is delivering for Texas, the grant application process, some of the programs, and then the technical assistance and resources we have available. So happy almost birthday to IRA. Tomorrow is the anniversary of when the president signed the bill. The Inflation Reduction Act, IRA of 2022, makes the single largest investment in climate and energy in American history. It's enabling America to tackle the climate crisis, advancing environmental justice, securing America's position as a world leader in domestic clean energy manufacturing, and putting the United States on a pathway to achieve the Biden administration's climate goals, including net zero by 2050. So all of this is coming at, we're using a whole government approach to tackle the clean energy transition and really that net zero by 2050. Congress has given DOE new mandates and unprecedented funding. As you see there in the middle, we have 90 billion, that's billion, not million, in grants and rebates, and 250 billion in loan and loan guarantees. And so we'll go over a little bit about what those loan and loan guarantees mean and how you access those funds as well. But we have a lot of money. We're not just tackling this from an energy efficiency standpoint. We're really looking at energy holistically and how we tackle getting to zero by 2050. So that is concentrating on hydrogen, buildings efficiency and electrification, carbon management, energy storage, electric grid, cybersecurity, critical minerals and materials, domestic supply chains, which is huge for making sure this transition can happen, EVs and chargers, state, local, and tribal partnerships, workforce development, that's another huge one I know all of you deal with day in and day out, and clean energy programs. So I'm not going to go over this entire slide, but because of that unprecedented amount of funding and really concentration on the Department of Energy, we really redid the way that we're interacting. We actually reorganized the department. Most of you won't deal with a lot of these offices on this chart, but I really want you to think about the state and community energy programs office that's here sort of in the middle. That's a new program that is really intended for folks like you. The weatherization assistance, the state energy programs, all of the things that really touch local communities. We made this new office to really concentrate on how we deploy these funds. A lot of the block grants and formula grants come through this office. Most of all of them go through that office. And so I will make sure by the end of this, you know how to connect with this office. My team and that team works really hand in hand in communicating with communities. I frequently set up meetings for cities and counties and states with that office to talk through all the different programs and to make sure that folks know the opportunities coming out of that office. So just really wanted to highlight that because the secretary, it was very intentional that this office was formed in the wake of all of the funding that we have from both the infrastructure bill and the IRA. This is really our mission. So it's catalyzing the nation's equitable transition to a clean, secure, affordable, and resilient energy system. So we want to lower energy bills for households and businesses, create good jobs, boosting energy supply chains and domestic manufacturing. We want to advance world-class next-generation clean energy technology demonstrations and make the energy system more secure, reliable, and resilient. And here in Texas, we really want that reliable energy system. We're embedding key DOE priorities into our work. Eddy talked about this a little bit, some of the sort of strings that are attached with a lot of this funding, but it really is leading with our values. Justice 40 is it was a Biden administration goal set by the president. The federal government has made it a goal that 40% of the overall benefits of certain federal investments flow to disadvantaged communities that are marginalized, underserved, and overburdened by pollution. This really, I traveled with the secretary, I think that was a month ago now, down to Port Arthur, where you have the largest refineries in the country, I think in the world actually, and really looking at communities that have been on the front lines and on the fence lines of the energy of really fueling America, that we make sure that we're thinking about how these funds, this amazing amount of money, goes to helping those communities that have been burdened the most by American energy. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. Again, that sort of goes hand in hand with Justice 40. We want to make sure that all communities are able to access these funds, and that the folks that have been burdened the most have a chance at these funds. Good jobs. We want to make sure that these funds create good paying jobs to attract and retain skilled workers, and that workers have a voice in the jobs, and then the decisions that are made that affect them. In some places that's labor unions, and others it's not, but it is the principles of good paying jobs. And then the workforce and community agreements. Community benefit agreements are huge for the department. This is not lip service. As you can see in that blue box, community benefit plans are 20% of the technical merit points on projects. And so when we're looking at an application, 20% is a large amount of whether or not a project gets funded. And so we want to make sure that communities are supportive of the projects that are coming in, that communities are have a seat at the table to talk about what it looks like in their community, and make sure that workers in the community are being hired, and that there's a plan for folks in the community to have a chance at those jobs, which might mean workforce training. And so those plans and the community benefit agreements are very, very, very important to the department, and just really crucial in how we're looking at this money going out into communities. Bill and Ira are delivering from Texas. These numbers are a little bit out of date. We'll have new ones soon, but $15 billion has already been announced and heading to Texas. 589 projects have been identified for funding, and there's a lot more coming. Clean energy and power. This really makes historic investments in upgrading the infrastructure. All of us who lived through the winter storm know that we want a grid that is resilient, and that that's happening all over the country. So we have a lot of funding that's going into strengthening our grids. 310 million has been allocated to Texas for clean energy, energy efficiency, and power in 22 and 23. So some of those programs that go into that, Eddy talked about the weatherization assistance program. I think you touched on that. That was 173 million that's coming to Texas. And this really goes to low income folks to make sure that they can put insulation in their homes, new windows, all of the things that help increase the energy efficiency of homes and to decrease energy bills. The average decrease is $372 a year for a household. So this really goes into the pockets of low income folks. And so there's 173 million just coming to Texas alone. The state energy program, that's the money that flows down to energy. Eddy put up the map of all the different energy offices across the country. We want to make sure that there is a strong energy office in all of our states and territories. And so there's 33.1 million coming down to the state energy office. And then on the EECBG, which is the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant Programs, there's 29 million coming down to Texas. And then on the grid, something that's so important in the state, 60.9 million has been announced. It has not been sent out already, but we made that announcement, I think probably 6-8 weeks ago, that will be coming down to Texas to help with strengthening the grid. Electric vehicle charging. I know Lori's going to go into some of the transportation stuff later, so I won't go too much into this, but we have 408 million in formula funding over 5 years to support electric vehicle charging in the state. They've already been allocated 147 million to build out a network of EV chargers across the state. This is happening across the country. It's sort of, if you build it, they will come. And we have some other programs that are competitive to help fill in local communities. That's not coming through energy, but there is some programs I'll briefly touch on later to help build out in communities outside of the statewide plan. And then legacy, pollution, and cleanup. We want to make sure, I mentioned this earlier, that we are cleaning up the messes of the past. So we have this is very small on my screen, 106.5 million has been allocated to Texas. And some of that's for capping orphaned oil wells and gas wells and reclaiming abandoned mine lands. And then 12.5 million in Texas has been allocated to clean up brownfield sites. So I think it's really important that we put money into cleaning up the past. So how do you apply for all of these monies? So there's competitive grants, and then there's the block grants that Eddy was referring to. Want to just make sure to say the applications are reviewed and selected for award negotiation by civil servants with subject matter expertise. I will never be part of the decision chain on who gets competitive grants. The Secretary of Energy, Jennifer Granholm, has no part in the decision-making chain. And so this really is a merit-based and highly, process that is very, very merit-based. Really kind of just want to go quickly through what that looks like on the competitive side. The first step that we do when we have a competitive grant coming out is called an RFI. This is a really important step, and even nonprofits, businesses, industry folks, association folks, when you see these coming out, it's really important that we get a diverse set of responses to these. This is really the opportunity to help us hear from folks that are really going to be going after this money and utilizing the funds on how we best design programs to get the money out and get it going to its best use. We want to make sure it's flexible. We want to make sure it really works with the folks that are going to be utilizing the programs. And so before they're set, before we have the FOIAs going out, this is the one opportunity folks have to really weigh in on what the program should look like when we administer it. Notice of intent, NOIs, that doesn't always happen. We don't always put out an NOI. Sometimes we skip straight to the funding opportunity, but it's kind of that middle ground that puts out sort of the next progress on where we're at with the funding announcement. And then the funding announcement comes out. And that's really when you'll have all the guidance and information on what we're looking for. And you can submit your proposal, project plan, supporting documents. The North Texas folks did an amazing webinar probably a year ago now on what this looks like, how you actually get a SAM account, and how you actually go apply for the fund. So I'm sure they recorded that. And so if you don't have someone in the office that has applied for a federal grant before and need help from A, please reach out, because we do have a lot of resources for folks that are just starting off and don't really know the federal funding processes, but this is the basics of it. And then on the formula side, the allocations will come out. Congress really decides how much is coming to each state. Obviously, it's based on population, and there are various other factors that Congress puts into how the formula allocations will work. So we release those. And then Eddy talked about ALRDs, which is the administrative and legal requirements for a funding opportunity. And this is really when you get to see what the guidance really is on the program and how it's going to work and what's going to be needed from you to get your information and to apply for the grants. And then the formula application, and this is when you submit everything to DOE. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the programs. There is no way that I can get through everything that we have But at the end, I'll go through of how to stay engaged and how to access a lot of these programs and know what's happening and be able to stay on top of things. As I talked about before, we have the transportation and EV infrastructure. We started a new office. This is brand new. It's a joint office between the Department of Energy and the Department of Transportation. Driveelectric.gov is the email. Is the website for it, and it's a just wealth of information. It really goes through if you're a city, if you're a state, if you're a community trying to figure out how you build out your EV infrastructure. It has so many resources. So I really encourage, if you all are looking at this outside of, what's happening on the statewide level, and you want to fill in those gaps, this is a great place to go and see a lot of the resources. I highlighted one in here. We have a toolkit for planning in rural communities. And I think we have, for every kind of community, but I wanted to highlight that one in particular because I know that rural communities have particular challenges in this space. And also wanted to just make sure that y'all know that we have a program to fill in the gaps. The statewide program, the NEVI program that's coming down that will really build out corridors throughout the state and help lessen some of the anxiety that folks have in transitioning over to electric. There is funding available for filling in those gaps. So please look at that if your community is really thinking about how you can build out your EV infrastructure. EECBG, this is the one that is most popular right now, that I want to make sure that all of you know about, and that you are utilizing these dollars. They're really the easiest, the least amount of red tape that I'll be able to provide to anybody. The Energy Efficiency and Conservative Block Grants, it is really a pretty flexible program. It's going out to 2,700 communities across the country. It's going to reach 250 million Americans. And this is really, really flexible dollars. It's $550 million across the country. You will see when you bring up information on it that it said the pre-award information sheets were due by July 31st, but we are still accepting those. So just if you see that, please know that we're still accepting them. The state of Texas, as Eddy said, we have kind of two allocations. We have allocations for states. So the state of Texas just got, shy of $5 million. And local governments were allocated a little over $24 million. 105 local governments were eligible in Texas for funds. I have a link in here and I will drop it in the chat after I present. I would encourage all of you to click on that link, see if your community is eligible, because this is the largest amount of communities that we've ever funded. And so it has been a challenge to make sure that everyone knows that they have an allocation, and to make sure that they understand how to get the information in that we need from you all to be able to access those funds. And then the other link that I'll drop in the chat later as well is the application hub. Government and DOE does not always do a great job of websites. We're actually redoing our entire website. It'll be up, launched probably early next year. But I will say that this grant application hub has been really well done. It has webinars, it has presentations, it has, trying to target different types of communities. I really think that they've thought about all of the questions and what different types of communities might need. And so if you are eligible, please make sure that your second stop should be there to figure out what all you need to get these funds coming down to your community. I also really wanted to highlight the options with this. One, you can get a grant. Your allocation could be $85,000. And then if you're looking at a community like Dallas, I think it's $1.1 million, right? So it's really based on population and some other factors. some of the communities aren't getting a large amount of money. And so, these programs cost a lot. And so you can use that as a grant for a particular project that you want to fund, use that for seed money to fund a particular project. Or you can go with option 2, which I have been a big advocate of. And in lieu of a grant, you can opt into a voucher, which covers either 1, technical assistance, or 2, equipment purchase. And so the equipment purchase can be something that you purchased up to 5 years ago, or you're going to purchase, so you can get a reimbursement for something that you purchased. So this can be, high efficiency lights. It can be you bought an EV. It can be all kinds of different things. And so I really encourage folks, instead of going the grant route, especially if you have a smaller award, to really look at the 2 vouchers that you can get. Let me dig in a little bit more about what the technical assistance services look like. These can be all kinds of different things. So say you want to see what it would cost and what it would save the city to put solar panels up on city buildings, right? I'm just using an example. You can use our consultants to really go in and do a feasibility study on what that would cost the city and what it would save the city. So instead of funding a particular project, you can use it to do a study, to figure out a climate action plan for your area. There's lots of different things you can do with that technical assistance. So if you have some ideas in your community that you've been, throwing around, trying to figure out if it makes sense, and you really want to get some consultants in to figure out what that might look like for your community, that might be a really great way to go. So this program, we're trying to get folks to have their pre-award letters in as soon as possible. So really make sure by the end of this call, you should check to make sure is your community eligible, and make sure that that you visited that hub. And with all of these programs, we have a great team at the EACBG program. They are more than willing to do calls with communities and talk you through exactly how and what you need to do to get your application in. Renew America Schools is a program I wanted to touch on briefly. We've already done the first round of funding. This is just a great program, really supporting schools to bring down operation costs. This can be energy efficiency projects. It can be HVAC, going into heat pumps, or using some other energy efficient equipment, windows, solar panels, all kinds of different things for schools to bring down their energy burden. So we did the first tranche already, and so we'll have another one coming out next year in 2024. So please look out for that one. Just a really easy program to bring down costs for schools. Eddy touched on these a little bit, but 2 huge programs that we released the ALRDs for here recently are the home efficiency rebates and home electrification and appliance rebates. This is really at the center of the DOE funding through IRA. These are huge programs for us, $4.3 billion and $4.5 billion across the country. The home efficiency rebates are the grants that run through the state, so that would go to the state energy office. And these are really to assist in whole home retrofits. So insulation, air sealing, anything that you can do to, very similar to the weatherization program. So this is really about bringing that energy efficiency into homes, saving consumers money, making sure that low and mid-income folks really have access to getting their houses in a good place to bring down their energy burdens. I know all of us are feeling it this time of year here in Texas. And so, I have already done weather sealing on my house to try to reduce my costs. So all of these things for low and mid-income folks that can really bring down those burdens. And then the second part of that is the home electrification and appliance rebates. These are Energy Star equipment, such as heat pumps, washers, dryers, stoves, ovens, electrical panels, wiring upgrades. They are really, tackling the homes on the efficiency rebate side, and then bringing down by having these really energy efficient appliances in homes to really make sure that we're being as energy efficient as possible, and bringing down that demand side on energy and states. So as Eddy said, we don't have these are not going to happen very quickly. We just got the guidance out to states. So there will be a period of the states submitting their plans to DOE, and expect that this will roll out. They keep saying winter, which I've asked for a more succinct definition of what winter means. But I think that these will be pretty soon, but not immediately coming out. But I think that this is going to be an amazing program that's really going to help consumers. We are working with big box stores to figure out how we do point of sale rebates so that folks aren't having to put out the entire amount and then apply for rebates. So we're hoping we can make this as easy as possible for folks to really increase their energy efficiency in homes. These are some programs to watch for. I won't go too far into these, but these are some programs that'll be coming up soon, that can really help with contributing to energy efficiency. The building codes, energy future grants. We just have so many programs that are coming out that I think would be really applicable to communities. I want to touch a little bit on our loan programs office. They have a lot of money. You can see here, they have over $100 billion in authority for loans. We are putting out loans very quickly. We want to get this money out and get this money going to helping industry, businesses really build out our manufacturing. Some of them have been in batteries, some of them have been in sort of EV supply chain, critical minerals, and some have been, for nuclear plants that cost, hundreds of millions of dollars. So they are pretty flexible. There's some in the IRA funding that are specific to particular kinds of projects, and then some of the authority is pretty flexible in what we're funding. If there are big projects that you're looking at, or for your folks that are doing more the economic development side of things, the loans start at about 100 million is sort of the scope that we're looking at. But it is a great place to go if folks are looking for some capital. And so I wanted to make sure to highlight that because there's a lot of authority there. Also wanted to highlight quickly the energy savings hub that we launched. I wish that everything was ready for the home efficiency rebates and the home electrification rebates so that, you could actually get these moving once you see what you are eligible for. But just wanted to show you what that looks like. You go onto this website here. It's, again, this energy.gov/save. This is what it looks like. And then it sort of goes through, if you're a homeowner, you kind of put in all of your information and it tells you what you might be eligible for in the rebates and tax incentives. Renters, drivers. So this talks about the EV rebates and credits. And so it kind of goes through all of those. And again, I think we're going to really be pushing those kinds of resources out a lot more once the programs roll out from the states, and folks can actually get those dollars and have those savings. I want to talk a little bit about technical assistance and engagement. SCEP, which is the folks I said y'all really need to get connected with. So leave here knowing that if you're not connected with SCEP, you need to be. They have a resource hub for local governments and school districts. They are constantly having webinars. And so I want to make sure that y'all have that URL and can access all of the wonderful resources they have there. And we're really looking at putting together all of the different, so sorry. Someone just rang my doorbell, so we'll keep going here. So excuse my dogs. Yes, so energy.gov/save was that. Eddy already got me. We want to make sure that that we're putting all the TA together. And so we're really working at having a place to go on the DOE website and see cross program offices, what all is available. The SCEP place is going to be the place if you are in a local government or community that you'll go, but we'll have those as sort of a cross-cutting place later with even more TA opportunities. Okay, sorry. I think that's what, oh, and this is the sign up for SCEP here. I will also throw that in the chat once I'm done here. You need to sign up for the SCEP newsletter so that you're staying on top of all of those funding opportunities that are really focused on cities, states, and communities. So I'll drop that in the chat as well. And then want to make sure that you have all the different ways to stay connected. We had a weekly newsletter that has gone down and will come back up in a couple weeks. So I will give you my email address. Please email me if you want to be on that newsletter to get sort of the latest and greatest of what's coming out from the department. This energy.gov/clean energy infrastructure is a good place to go to see sort of cross-cutting all of the different programs that are coming out and the different funding opportunities in the clean energy space. And I know we're not doing questions yet, but if you have questions after this, please reach out. I mean, my job is to really connect folks with program offices, make sure that I can send resources that we have, and make sure that, you know, you have everything you need. If your community is thinking about, you know, a particular technology that you want to look into, geothermal has become sort of hot in energy right now, no pun intended. And so there is a community in the Midwest that that I connected with our geothermal office to talk about feasibility of using geothermal for city facilities. You know, anything like that that y'all are thinking about, I'm happy to make those connections and make sure that you're talking with energy experts and the folks that know a whole lot more about each of these projects than I do. But I'm really here to serve as that in-between person to get you connected with folks that you need to talk with. And so I know we're going to do questions at the end. I'm going to drop a bunch of links into the chat during the next presentation, and happy to answer questions during the Q&A or after. Always happy to set up calls with communities to talk about goals and what you're working on, and do my best to connect you with the resources that we have. So I will leave it at that.
Great. Thank you so much, Crystal. That was very informative. And I just had to give a +1 to the comment in the chat about how their newsletter is very helpful. It is. I mean, every time it comes in, I'm spending a few minutes going through that. There's always something to learn. So very good presentation, Crystal. Thank you. So now what we're going to do is we're going to have each of the COGs do a brief presentation about some of the non-DOE programs that are out there to promote energy efficiency. And I'm going to start with myself. I'm going to talk about a couple of EPA programs. You're all able to see my screen okay?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, great. I think that was Lori. Thank you. So I'm going to be talking, like I said, about EPA incentives specifically. And there's going to be two that I'm going to focus on. I'm going to spend probably more time on the climate pollution reduction grants. And then I'll talk a little bit about the EPA's greenhouse gas reduction fund. These are both programs under the Inflation Reduction Act. So to start with climate pollution reduction grants, so these grants, they come in two phases. We're currently in the planning grant phase, and in this phase, MSAs and states are to develop strong greenhouse gas emission reduction strategies. And as part of that, as part of those grants, there are three main deliverables. One is a priority climate action plan that's due on March 1st of next year. And then there's a comprehensive climate action plan that expands the priority climate plan, and that's going to be due in the summer of 2025. And then at the end of the grant, around 2027, I believe, there's a status report that's due. But what these planning grants provide is $3 million for each state, those that opted in, I should say, and then $1 million for the most populous MSAs in the country. I believe it was the top 67, and then if anyone opted out, then 68, 69, and so on would be eligible for that money. And so 6 MSAs in Texas were part of that $1 million allocation each. Of course, Houston, DFW, San Antonio, and Austin, but also El Paso and McAllen received $1 million, and that's to cover at a minimum the MSA. The administrator for the statewide planning grants is going to be the TCEQ, and the lead agency in each of the MSAs is going to vary. Usually it's the COG. In our case, it's the city of San Antonio, and will be a sub grantor to cover basically the non-city of San Antonio areas of the AACOG region. We're going to be expanding a little bit beyond our MSA boundaries. I believe DFW is doing the same. I can't speak for the others. So that covers the planning grants, and I'll get into a little bit more information about what the climate action plans actually entail. But there's also an implementation grant phase that is expected to open in September. But that's going to open up $4.6 billion for competitive grants to help put these plans into action. So to get them from paper to shovel, basically. There's not a whole lot of guidance at this point, so that's going to be coming out in the coming weeks. But what you need to understand about the implementation grants is that anything that you are requesting funding for on the implementation grants, it must be something that's included in the climate action plan, in the priority climate action plan, to be specific. So what does the priority action plan actually contain? There's 4 components, the first of which is a greenhouse gas emissions inventory. And then you're to quantify any proposed greenhouse gas emission reduction measures. And of course, there's also a benefits analysis to low income and disadvantaged communities. And then there's also the authority to implement. You have to establish that you have the authority to implement. So as I said before, those are going to be due on March 1st, 2024. And they're not meant to be, real robust. They're meant to be just, again, priority actions. Your greenhouse gas inventory doesn't have to be super comprehensive. It can just, contain some of the major sectors, the timeline is so tight. They're due March 1st, and to my knowledge, nobody's received any money yet. So it's a very tight timeline. So we're not expected to really get too in depth with the priority climate action plans. The comprehensive climate action plan is much more in depth. We have a lot more time to work on that. So they're expecting your greenhouse gas emission inventory to cover really all your sources, all significant sources, I should say. You need to have a plan for how you're going to leverage other federal funds. And good news is we found out today there's a ton of opportunities out there from other agencies to leverage those funds as required. You have to set targets for greenhouse gas emissions that are based on, those quantified greenhouse gas reduction measures that are identified in the action plan. You have to have a full benefits analysis that covers low-income and disadvantaged communities, but also other benefits to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. You may have emissions that are not greenhouse gases that are also reduced, and that could be beneficial, would certainly be beneficial. And then there's also a workforce analysis that's required, and as it should be. I can think of situations in the past where new technology has rolled out, but there was not a corresponding workforce development program to help build up the knowledge. And so this new technology, it's great for the first couple of years, and then there's nobody available or knowledgeable to repair that equipment should it malfunction. And so these these companies reverted back to the original technology, and it was very unfortunate. So we definitely don't want that to happen with this program or any of the other programs. So that's why workforce development, like I said before, is a cross-cutting theme across all different federal agencies. And then there's the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. So essentially, this is opening up capital, particularly in low income and other underserved communities, to invest in clean technology projects. And of course, clean technology, clean energy has the potential to lower energy costs, not just for local governments, but for families as well. Creates good paying jobs. And when we, improve our energy efficiency, we're also protecting public health by reducing our emissions. And the whole idea is to benefit everybody, including underserved communities. And that goes back to the Justice 40 initiative that was brought up earlier. 40% of the benefits of federal investment must go to underserved communities. So the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund contains 3 different sub-programs. I'm highlighting 2 here because they're actually active and you can submit applications for them. There's the National Clean Investment Fund, and this is a very selective program, I would say. It's only going to be awarding grants to a couple of national nonprofits, and those nonprofits are going to be providing the financing to the private sector rather than, EPA directly. And then that's a $14 billion funded program, so massive investment there. And then there's the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator, and that's more to establish programs that support cooperation among industry networks, among community lenders. We want to build their capacity to be able to issue this financing. And so they'll be awarding grants to between 2 and 7 nonprofits to deliver that funding and provide technical assistance. And this one is specifically for underserved communities. And these are active links there, and you can also get more Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund info there in the box in the upper right. So if you're interested in either of these programs for CPRG, if you're in one of the MSAs and the 6 MSAs that I had listed there, figure out who your lead organization is by clicking the link there and reach out to be included in their future communications. If you're not in one of those 6 MSAs, TCEQ is the lead, but there's no guidance available just yet. If you do have questions, there is Casey Savinich with the Office of Air. Her email's provided. Your chief welcomes any inquiries. And then, of course, you can find more information on the CPRG website. And for the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, if you're eligible, definitely take a look at the NOFOs. I've got the links on the previous slide. I wanted to also mention Solar for All. It's the 3rd of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund programs, and it's to invest in residential rooftop and community solar for underserved communities. And you can find more information on the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund website or email that website there. I'm not aware. I looked all over that website for a newsletter. I did not see one, but definitely send that email to the GGRF team for more information. And your COG is there to help you, and we have each other's backs as COGs. We're always helping each other. I mean, the 3 of us are collaborating on this presentation today. So feel free to reach out to me as well if you're around the AACOG area, or my colleagues at North Central Texas or West Central Texas COGs. And there's my contact information there. The slides will be made available to all the attendees. It won't be immediate. I had some staffing issues. It's going to take me a little bit longer to access the email list, but we will be providing that to you by the end of the week, if not early next week. And with that, I will stop sharing, and we can move on to Lori with North Central Texas COG.
Thank you, Lyle. Okay, can y'all see this slide? Awesome, thanks. So hello again. So I'm going to talk about a few programs from the Department of Transportation. And I'm really speaking from the MPO role. So we are the North Central Texas Council of Government. So we are your friendly local COG if you are in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, or the North Central Texas area, I should say. But we are also the designated metropolitan planning organization. And as I mentioned, we handle transportation funding, and I'm actually in the transportation department. So I'm really kind of speaking from the perspective of an MPO right now, as opposed to being a COG, and wanted to make sure everybody is aware that there are over 20 MPOs scattered across the state in the more urbanized areas. If you don't know who yours is, I would highly recommend getting to know them. But this is our region. If you're in any of the other areas, find your MPO, because that is your key to accessing much of the Department of Transportation funding for that I'll be talking about today. So not to be confused with the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant, CPRG, there is also a Carbon Reduction Program, CRP, from USDOT. This is a new program created under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or IIJA. The purpose is to fund projects that reduce CO2 from on-road transportation sources. It is a formula program, so the money flows directly to the state DOTs. Texas will receive, as you can see there, over $600 million over 5 fiscal years, and that's just the federal share. Then there's a 20% state match as well. So there's plenty of projects that can be funded here. That money is going to be split 65% urbanized areas based on allocations. So kind of based on those MPO, there's a formula for all formula funding that comes to TxDOT and then flows to MPO areas. There's a formula that governs how that funding gets distributed across MPO areas based on population and other metrics. And then there's another 35% that can be in any location statewide. So this is truly a program that can be accessed or used on transportation projects statewide that reduce CO2. And so some of those can overlap into efficiency type projects. The state is required to develop a carbon reduction program in consultation with MPOs. So we've been in contact with TxDOT a little bit about that. They are slated to submit their plan to, or their strategy, their carbon reduction strategy, to federal highways in October. So there should be a draft out for comment sometime soon. And then the MPOs do have some selection authority for projects in their area. So the carbon reduction program is very broad in terms of what it can fund. It's projects that can reduce carbon dioxide from the transportation sector. So basically anything that can help reduce fuel consumption, anything that can improve fuel efficiency can fall into that category, as well as some other things. So reducing impacts of freight movement, truck parking especially, which is a very hot topic in the state of Texas. We have a shortage of truck parking. It causes trucks to idle. It causes them to park on the shoulder or in the right of way, which then disrupts other traffic. So that's a key area. Vehicle to infrastructure connecting technology, so connected autonomous vehicles, connected traffic signals, things that help traffic elements communicate with each other more efficiently and therefore operate more efficiently. Alternative fuel vehicle deployments, electrification is key, but other fuels can be part of this as well. Diesel engine retrofits, congestion pricing and traffic management, reducing demand for roadways in general, which can be an area that not only your traditional like HOV strategies, but maybe you get into some like more creative transit-oriented development, land use type strategies there. Reducing emissions near ports. CMAQ, let me come back to that for a second. Shifting transportation demand out of single occupant vehicles into public transportation, which is another category, developing the carbon reduction strategy, and then other transportation alternatives. So CMAQ is a different funding program called Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Improvement. It is only available to the areas of the state that have non-attainment problems. So the Dallas-Fort Worth, Houston, Austin, or Houston and San Antonio areas. And then I believe there's still CMAQ eligibility for El Paso as well. So there's a variety of projects that are eligible for funding under CMAQ, all of which can be funded under the carbon reduction program. So specifically, some kind of more tangible projects, you think about those different buckets, those different categories that I just kind of described, things that you could do, traffic flow improvements. So like things like adding dedicated right turn lanes or dedicated left turn lanes, electric vehicles and charging infrastructure, congestion pricing, traffic signals, energy efficiency light replacements like LED traffic signals, and also kind of smarter traffic signals that are more adaptive over time and can be more useful in the long run. Solar installations along highway right-of-way is something that potentially could be funded here. Sustainable pavements, construction materials, and then bicycle and pedestrian facilities. So Crystal gave a nod to some of the electric vehicle funding. I do want to speak just a moment on NEVI, National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Formula Program. So this was $5 billion nationwide. Texas gets about $408 million. This actually goes to the Texas Transportation Commission tomorrow. Tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. is their next commission meeting. And the first item on their agenda is whether or not to approve opening the first phase of this program. It'll be a competitive grant program. And there's two major phases. The first is to make sure that there's at least one electric vehicle charging station that meets a defined set of criteria in terms of how much charging capacity it has, how many vehicles it can charge, things like that, along all of the designated alternative fuel corridors across the state, which is essentially all of our interstates and a few other highway segments. So there's supposed to be at least one qualifying station every 50 miles. And so that first phase is what's up for discussion tomorrow. And then that would be about 55 locations statewide, depending on some additional sites that may open. And so what you'll see on this map are some dark blue dots. These are TxDOT study areas. So each one of these dots represents about a 2 square mile chunk of land. Within 1 mile of a highway exit that TxDOT has focused on to install a new charging station. And so they'll be looking for grant applications for people to build charging stations in these dark blue dot areas. So that'll be the first phase. Once that's done, they move into kind of two parallel approaches. One is to make sure there's charging available throughout the state, urban or rural. And they plan to do that by installing charging stations in or near county seats statewide. And so you can see all of these little dots that are kind of centered in the counties. Just so happens all of our state highways intersect at county seats, or many of our state highways intersect at county seats at a county courthouse, and those are generally in the vicinity of 50 miles apart. So by putting a charging station at each of the county seats, we get access to charging on and about a 50-mile increment anywhere you travel. And then the third element, or the second pathway in that second phase, is to work with the MPOs. So again, this is where you want to know your MPO to identify where some additional charging should go within that urbanized area. So there is a bucket of money set aside for each MPO boundary or MPO territory. So like for our region, there's about $64 million set aside. So we'll be working collaboratively with TxDOT to say, for our 12 county area that gets $65 million, here's the areas, here's the additional dots, basically, where we think those stations should be located and what kind of stations we think they should be. So that's a planning process that every MPO has the opportunity to go through with TxDOT over the next few years. Excuse me, I'm sorry. So just quickly, I want to just flag that there's several other programs that are related to transportation efficiency. Crystal said that there's funding to fill gaps in infrastructure access. One of the key programs there is the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Program. That is to build electric vehicle and other alternative fueling infrastructure. So it could be hydrogen, natural gas, or propane. That funding round was available earlier this year. Think next year's, the fiscal year 24 allocation should be about $500 million, but it gets split into corridors. So along those major highways or within communities, which is where you can get more into kind of filling gaps around specific areas. There's a low-no emissions bus program for transit buses or public transportation to shift to electric. Excuse me. Or other low-emitting fuels. Reducing truck emissions at port facilities. Can do idle reduction or bottleneck removal. So if you've got like a lot of warehousing, distribution centers, traditional port facilities, that could be something that's worth looking at. Low carbon transportation materials. And then a transit-oriented development pilot program that's very much a land use program. So all of these are things where you want to work with your local transportation agencies. So those could be transit providers, your local TxDOT district, or your MPO. There's a handful of resources here. I imagine we're going to send these slides out after the webinar, so you can click on all these links. But there's the Carbon Reduction Program guidance, the MPO website, Federal Highways website for transportation planning, and then Texas A&M Transportation Institute does a lot of work on transportation in conjunction with TxDOT, and is a really robust resource for all kinds of questions. So they are also a good group to get to know. And TxDOT has a 2024 Unified Transportation Program that kind of outlines kind of high-level, very key initiatives that is a useful reference. And with that, just wanted to share my contact information real quick, just lclark@nctcog.org. Feel free to hit me up with any questions, whether you are in our region or not. I'm happy to connect you to whoever is your best contact. And that's all I've got.
Great. Thank you, Lori, for helping us realize that energy efficiency is not just buildings. Transportation is as much a part of the solution as anything else. Now we're going to go to Kristen McKinney with the West Central Texas Council of Governments to talk about some USDA programs. Kristen.
Yes. Let me share my screen. Can you guys see that? Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go over a few resources provided by USDA with the funding that they have gotten from the IRA. USDA tends to focus more on rural initiatives and communities. So as the West Central Texas Council of Governments, we have a little bit more specific focus in USDA funding. So the first allocation of funding by the USDA is to the Forest Service, and those are in initiatives to help protect forest health and prevent wildfire. And that's in the form of some direct funding. They also have some competitive grants for non-federal forest landowners to help in sustaining healthy and working forests. And then they also have funding for specifically their state and private forestry program and urban community forestry programs to assist in planting trees and acquiring land for conservation. So those programs are more focused on some urban forestry development. So that's not necessarily in rural communities, but they it looked like that it had to do a lot with developing land, park areas, green belts and such in the urban areas. The second allocation area for the funding is to the Natural Resources Conservation Service, and they allocated about $20 billion for the expansion of some conservation programs that they have pre-existing and that are highly utilized by farmers and ranchers, but a lot of times they don't have enough funding to go out to the demand. So the 20 billion allocated to the conservation services programs that they already have allowed them to expand those services as well. And you can find a whole list of those specific programs on their website for the IRA. The link is up there at the top of the slide, USDA.gov/IRA. And lastly, their third focused area is specifically for rural development. And they have allocated up to $13.2 billion in investment. And those are in areas of rural electrification, clean energy, power production, job creation, and economic growth. And their hope is to help entities be able to purchase renewable energy, zero emission systems, and make energy efficiency improvements that will significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And they have broken apart this funding into two of their services, the Rural Utilities Service, and that funding can be accessed through loans specifically for renewable energy infrastructure, and also through loans and grants that have been created for the purchase of renewable energy, zero emissions, and carbon capture systems. And then through the Rural Business and Cooperative Service, they have a grant called the Rural Energy for America program. I pronounce it REAP. And there's also a link to that NOFO, and I can provide that link later in the chat. These slides will also be shared. And that grant is for underutilized technologies and technical assistance, and it exists in a competition that rolls quarterly. So the next application deadline for that competition is on September 28th. And more details for the REAP grant can be found on their website. They also have grants for infrastructure improvements in the biofuel industry. Again, I will link those resources during the next section of our presentation. And I will also link my contact information. And that's it that I have.
Great. Thank you, Kristen. And thanks for bringing up forests too. That's not something I think a lot of people would think about, but forests are a carbon sink. They help remove carbon dioxide from the air. So it's very important that our forests are well maintained and well kept, so that they're providing the maximum benefit for us. So thanks again, Kristen. Okay, so wow, I'm very pleased with how the timing worked out for everything. So I had intended for about a 25-minute question and answer period, maybe some discussions to be had there. So we're pretty much right on schedule. Krista, I guess as our question guru, I'll have you just kind of read through them in order that they were posed. Some, I know I answered one, I think a couple others were answered during the presentation, so that's great, but the ones that haven't been addressed, we can start going through those now.
Sure. So Peter Bella asked, in programs that support local communities, such as weatherization, how does DOE or SECO coordinate programs and funding with local utilities and municipalities? I'm not sure if that would be a good question for Eddy.
Yeah, Lori, Eddy or Crystal. Lori did turn her camera on though.
We don't. I think Eddy can answer that. I mean, you have to list who you're working with, and who the money is flowing through. But I think, oh, there you are, Eddy. Sorry.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like with the rebate programs, one of the requests that the Department of Energy has made, and rightfully so, is that you try to leverage all funding that you can with other opportunities and other funding opportunities. In our case, let's say with the rebate program, they want us to coordinate with the transmission and distribution providers who have their own sets of rebates. Their contractors have their own sets of rebates. So you're always coordinating with them to see where other opportunities are available, where they can leverage a particular funding opportunity with something else. And if they do that, then they've maximized the opportunity within the program.
Eddy, do your preliminary energy assessments or technical assistance, do they also cover possible solutions? Well, they do cover solutions, but funding sources?
Yeah, they cover different funding opportunities. Of course, our Lone Star program is one of them, and we always want them to talk about that first. Since we funded a lot of those preliminary energy assessments with proceeds from the Lone Star program. And so we want them to talk about that. We want them to talk about other opportunities where there could be bonds or other rebate opportunities through the transmission and distribution providers. We want whoever the end user is to have get the best value bang for their buck that they're going to invest in those capital improvements.
Okay, thanks, Eddy.
Great. All right, so our next question is, in San Antonio, we have a few 501c3 orgs that serve as signers for letters of intent. Do you have advice? And I think that might have been directed towards Crystal.
I need much more information. I don't really know. Letters of intent. Yeah, I don't. Is there more info on that?
There
Yeah,
was
Peter, do you mind elaborating?
People? Yeah.
Let me see if I have to unmute
that
him.
question was from Peter Bella. So I don't know if he can provide a little more context in the chat.
I may need to unmute you, Peter. 1 second. No, I think you should be able to do it. Or you can clarify in the chat if you'd rather.
Okay, so the Solar for All program needed letters of intent as an example.
Oh, you're muted.
Peter, if you want to email me, I can figure that out. I don't know. I'd have to work with the office that you're talking about in the program.
Okay. So our next question is, are the $173 million weatherization grant funds exclusively distributed through the AACOGs? If so, are they formula and competitive grants that are available to local nonprofits, partnered with local government entities in underserved communities within municipalities?
So, Eddy, you might want to take the first part of that. So I don't know if y'all exclusively work, well, it goes through the housing department too, so you might not be able to answer this, but the money flows through COGS. I don't know, some states use different kinds of nonprofits for the money to flow down, so I don't know what it looks like in Texas. And then what was the second part? There was something about weatherization competitive funds. The weatherization's all formula.
Right.
Yeah, so
it's all formula, so it flows through the Department of Housing and Community Affairs. So if you want to follow up with how they're going to distribute the funds, you probably should contact them directly and see where opportunities exist where you might be able to participate.
And then as far as getting that money, like to the actual homeowners, that's a need-based consideration. So they'll look at, not only will they look at household income, but your home has to be at a baseline condition to be able to even be eligible for weatherization, even if you do meet the income requirements. If your foundation is poor, if your roof is poor, they're not gonna accept the application, because I mean it makes less sense to weatherize those when you're kind of fundamentally not an efficient structure.
Okay, so next question is, will some of these energy efficiency and conservation programs be available to residential buildings only, or residential and commercial both, for homeowners, residents, rather than leased single-family homes?
So
That depends on the
okay.
community, doesn't it? I'm sorry, Crystal, that depends on the city. If they're receiving direct funding, they decide how they use it. I mean, Department of Energy provides different categories of how the funds can be used, and we have to choose which categories for which we're going to use the funds. And for us, we're going to use it exclusively for public entities. For direct wards, I thought the city decided how they were going to use it. Each city could use it for a different purpose.
100%. So if you got a direct allocation for EECBG, the city can decide how they want to use it. They can either use it for a grant with any of the specified purposes, which are pretty varying, or they can use the voucher. So each city that gets an allocation, or county, their counties get some too, get to decide how they use it. And then the state allocation that goes to Eddy's office, 60% of that will flow down to communities that did not get a direct allocation. And so I have not heard any cities talk about using that for any sort of residential programs. It's mostly to increase energy efficiency of city and county facilities and buildings.
And that 60% is a minimum of 60%, so you can actually go way above it.
That is true.
So y'all were talking specifically about the EECBG program, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. And so beyond that program, I mean, there's just so many programs out there that, I mean, I think most building types will be eligible for something. And so what I hope will help you is I posted a link in the chat to an IRA pocket guide. I believe it's the USDA that came up with that, but it covers other agencies as well. But you can kind of, it's like a one-stop look at not each program, but a lot of programs and their the types of eligible applicants for each program. So you'll be able to look and easily see, if it's residential or what have you. So I hope that's helpful.
I'll look up the White House one as well. And the one that the White House put out is updated in real time with when a FOIA gets released, it'll have like the deadline. So that's a good one. Let me look that up and I'll drop it in the chat as well.
Oh, good. Thank you. We can move to the next question.
So we have a couple of questions that were actually answered by our presenters in the chat. So I think that was the last question that was unanswered.
Did we address the question about preventing retailers from raising the prices of appliances?
Yeah, I sort of, I didn't elaborate much, but we've been working with them for a long time on how to have provisions to keep that from happening. Not all stores will be able to run programs at point of sale, right? And so, there will be provisions to ensure that the prices aren't gouged for these savings, right? And so you also won't have to do it at point of sale if you don't want to. So depending on how it's set up in your state. So I think that there's been plenty of work done to ensure that prices aren't raised and that consumers are really getting the savings.
I do have another question that came in. So it is, my local government is looking for funding for feasibility analysis to identify the best pathway or opportunities for implementing emissions reduction, EV fleet, alternative fuel stations, etc. What is a good starting point?
Well, I mean, we sort of look at this from what funding do we have and where does that fit into what you're doing, right? And so I would go on, look at Bill, look at IRA and see if there are funding sources for what you're trying to do. It's a little hard when people come and say, here are all the projects, what can you fund? That's a little bit harder for us. And so if there's some sort of front end work you can do to figure out, you know, if any of the things you're working on fit into any of the buckets, and then we can go through particulars and figure out how to get your application through. So and then in emissions reductions, like that could be an EPA program, that could be a DOE program. And so, you know, if there's someone in your office that is concentrated on federal funding, like, you know, I think there needs to be a little bit pre-work done to figure out sort of what buckets are available. You know, we can set up a meeting and kind of talk through it. But it, you know, I would look a little bit to see if there's anything that stands out to you. It just makes it a little bit hard when you have a huge thing you're trying to accomplish and then there's not some pre-work done to figure out if there's any kind of programs that fit in.
I'll add to that a little bit. It sounds, Melinda, like all of the things that you're referencing are in that transportation space. And so your Friendly Local Clean Cities Coalition might be a good starting place. So if you're close to San Antonio, Lyle might be your best point of contact. If you're close to DFW or kind of, if you're more up towards the Panhandle or East Texas, we are happy to work with you. And then we've got colleagues that manage Clean Cities Coalitions in the Austin and Houston areas. So I will put a link to where you can find all 4 of the Texas Clean Cities Coalitions. There's also an organization called the Electrification Coalition, and they are a nonprofit that focuses specifically on electric vehicles, and they will offer what they call light touch technical assistance on kind of getting your fleet started. I don't know exactly what light touch technical assistance means. I've always tried to get clarification on what the definition of that is, but we can connect you with them as well. Rio Grande Valley. So actually, Rio Grande Valley, one of the MPOs down there, we've talked with Javier at one of the MPOs, and they are considering developing a Clean Cities Coalition. So we'd be happy to maybe reach out to him and you and see what we can do to kind of help network. I'll put my contact info, and Melinda, maybe we can just follow up offline.
Okay, and I see that Crystal has answered another question as far as applications for Solar for All.
Yeah, we're not able, I don't even know who has submitted applications. Like on the EECBG, I can look up if a city has turned in their paperwork because that's not a competitive process at all. But like, I won't know who's applied. That's not public information. So it's a little hard because sometimes I work with lots of different communities and companies on a funding opportunity, and then I don't know unless they tell me that they've applied. So yeah, that's not publicly available.
Hey, Crystal, on that Solar for All as well, EPA anticipated 56 awards, and there just happened to be 56 states, territories, and DC. And so I know that TDHCA applied for Texas, and I think there was a coalition of municipalities that also applied. So it'll be interesting to see because that throws off the 56 number concept that I think was originally intended.
And I wanted to address, Peter, your comment about applicability to the letters of intent for EECBG. I don't believe it is applicable to that program.
Oh, are you talking about the pre-award applications? I think that's probably what you meant. But now I don't remember what was the content of the question. I'm sorry. I was trying to look up one of these other ones. I can look up if you are eligible and you don't know if your community has applied. I can look up to see if the pre-award application is in, if that's what that meant.
I think he's wanting to know if letters of support are required as part of that pre-award.
No,
Or-
this is it's not competitive, right? Like the
Right,
city of
okay.
Dallas is getting 1.1 million something. They get that as long as they turn in their paperwork. So with competitive funding, letters of support are welcomed. So but on the grants, on the formula grants, you don't need any sort of letters of support. The money's already allocated.
Okay, thanks.
Do we have time for another question?
Yes.
Okay. So this question comes from someone who says they are a small business working on 2 initiatives in Texas. One, quantitative measurement of air quality impact on health, and 2, H2-based direct reduction of iron, which also requires generation of green H2. Their question is, how can we work with you? Who should we work with to figure out how to collaborate?
On the hydrogen, there's a lot of information on our website about our hydrogen strategy. I'll also look up, we're doing a webinar on Friday that is about all of our hydrogen programs. So I'll look that up and send it over in the chat. On the air quality, I don't know if someone else has any information on that, but we don't do a lot on, it's more on EPA side of on air quality, but anything on hydrogen, that's a huge priority of the administration. And so we have our hydrogen roadmap, we have a matchmaker tool, and I think you would benefit from being on that Friday webinar that will talk about all the different programs and how they fit together on hydrogen.
Okay. Do we have any other questions that popped up?
One last question, it looks like. Peter Bella is following up. He said, actually, my question is about assistance in community work that can support starting a 501c3 that will be necessary for EECBG grants. As he understands it, that's part of EPA's Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Center's work, but those TCTACs are apparently not up and running.
Yeah, and that's entirely possible, yeah, that they're not quite ready yet.
Yeah, I know one is, and I don't even know if there's a Tic Tac in Texas. I think there's one going to be in New Mexico and one in, I believe, Louisiana. So yeah, but that's, we are going to be able to utilize them for energy projects, but yes, I think the 2 in Region 6 are in New Mexico and Louisiana, if I'm not mistaken. But we'll be able to send folks there for energy projects for assistance as well. But I do not believe they're up and running.
I think that is all the questions that we've received.
Okay. Great. Wow. 6 minutes to spare. This was excellently timed. Thank you to everyone who showed up. Definitely reach out to any of us if you have any questions. Like I said before, I'm not going to be able to have the materials distributed today. I'm shooting for the end of the week, but if not, it'll be very early next week to get those. I want to thank our special guests, Eddy Trevino and Crystal Perkins with SECO and the Department of Energy, respectively. Thanks so much for your time and helping us understand all of these incentives and programs. I wanted to share one more thing before we break, and I'll open the floor to our presenters as well. But I wanted to share an opportunity coming up on Thursday. My friends at Texas PACE Authority are going to be hosting a webinar about USDA specific programs there. And so I have the registration link for you to sign up if you're interested in getting a real deep dive into USDA rural incentive programs. So the link is there for you to check out. I will be getting the chat transcripts sent out as part of the package as well. So I think there was a question in the chat related to that. Do any presenters have any final comments that they want to share? I guess I'll do a plug for Eddy there with SECO and their LED retrofit for local governments applications just opened on Friday, I believe. So I encourage everyone, when you're perusing the SECO website, to check that out as well.
And more funding opportunities to come.
Absolutely, always. COG folks, anything else you'd like to say?
Be sure to sign up for Crystal's newsletter because it's a really well done newsletter.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay. Well, if that's it, it's not a lot, but I'll give you all your 3 minutes back. Thanks again for being here. And I apologize about the recording. I don't know what happened at about 17 after. It just stopped, but I think I caught it soon enough so that the interruption will be just a few seconds at the most. So
and
again,
Lyle, be sure to check your expiration date on that recording because you had a notice that it was going to expire pretty soon.
I downloaded it right after I saw that, so we're good.
Okay.
Thank you, Eddy. Thank you, Crystal.
Technology.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Krista. And thank you to all the attendees.
Likewise. Thanks, everybody.